Warning: the following video contains references to violence, death, abandonment, genocide, emotional manipulation, torture, eugenics, substance abuse, child labor, slavery, pretty much anything and everything triggering. Viewer discretion is advised. Whether or not this video will be released during Pride Month itself isn't clear yet, but I want to make this video to lead into the next few as best as possible. So whether it's June, August, or even the future after that, thanks for being here. And thank you, most importantly, for not just staying for the FNAF video. I love the view count and all, but with all due respect, I have other things I want to do with this channel. Last thing, I want to dedicate this video to the lesbians I sat at lunch with in 8th grade. We didn't talk, at all. I was basically mute back then. But you guys seemed cool to me as a kid, and I really wish the best for you in the future. Video starting now? Good luck, you poor, poor soul. Hey guys, I'm V for Verbatim, and I'm quickly realizing that I need to get better at editing. Today, we're finishing the last of 3 big videos for the Pride Month, all under the same story, Chardonnay and Clova. Not for long though. You see, since we started revising the story, names have changed, stories have changed, and now we're on to the final characters of this 7th grade angsty drama fest. The 3 protagonists and the first characters ever made for the series, in fact. Chardonnay Blaze, Clova 56, and Lynn. Cringy new names pending. One is pink, one was grown in a hive, one is a pet goldfish, and we're going to be getting into all of that in this last lore section for this series. If this video sounds a little more final than the last story, it kind of is. The astrals remain relevant in most other stories that I've written, which is why the final part of that story isn't really the final episode involving them. These stories kind of end with this video, but the concepts will be important moving forward. But obviously I review topics as I go, which is why this is kind of where everything ends for these guys. So without further ado, let's end this series with the beginning one last time. So I've gone over the story behind these characters before, but to summarize the revisions here. 2 lesbians go on some kind of mission for a space queen and eventually fall in love with each other as one becomes a better person. Their crew grows along the way, a bartender friend that joins them, a reluctant skeleton bard, a blind, bloodthirsty elf assassin, and the perceived antagonist of the story all find a place on the spaceship with our main trio. Each obstacle character they encounter has a connection to one of the 9 rings of hell, and they all work for the queen in secret. That was the story as of the last video, and I hope that brief summary makes all of that crap from the last 2 videos a heck of a lot easier to follow. But with 2 videos under our belt now, the queen has her motivations, the mercenaries have their motivations, romantic subplots are more established, and even side characters have story and connection to our villains. Everyone's a little less angelic, good, and demonic evil, and it's more a matter of which side has committed the least amount of war crimes. Speaking of war crimes, it's time we finally talk about that. In this universe, there are plenty of species known for pretty egregious crimes. The Maristinians, Roman fish people, banished the demon race to hell. Another example is the Hendrinids, an intelligent race of plant people that initiated a war against the species they shared their homeworld with. Other innocent species suffered as a result of their actions. One of the worst instances of violence was actually the leveling of Earth's population during the time of the dinosaurs. The Piligarans had unintentionally crossed species and created a prototype human race, basically the fish creatures that later became us. They desolated Earth's surface, a planet colonized by dozens of other species, just to cover up their impurity. I'll get to the Piligarans soon, I promise. I'm just holding on as long as I can here. But in our current story, the crimes of the Norcasian race are very important. The current queen, Queen Nora, wasn't exactly the only queen of her kind to engage in immoral acts. The intergalactic market, the market the Norcasians facilitate, is known for its prevalent child exploitation and trafficking of sentient life forms. Even worse, though, is their history of colonialism. Melira, the Dark Elf from Part 1, was a victim of their forced takeovers. Her family was enslaved by the Norcasians, forced to collect the raw materials of their planet for their new rulers. Meanwhile, Melira and other less able-bodied creatures were collected on prison ships for other forms of manual labor. Now, I don't like to compare things to the Hulk. One of my favorite quotes is literally, "Don't compare chickens to the Hulk." I will provide no context for that one. But the Norcasians are a little Nazi-ish, and anybody that isn't like them is seen as another servant of their empire. Eugenics is definitely not a good look for them. Speaking of the Norcasian Empire and eugenics, let's talk about those guys. The Norcasians are the richest of the rich. Most of them serve in some kind of diplomatic position for the Queen if they do any form of labor at all, and the less wealthy of them serve on the intergalactic market to maintain the steady flow of trade. They're typically indentured servants to upper-class citizens who have things to sell but don't want to work themselves. They range from being slim and athletically built to being large, immobile gluttons for their own financial success. Americans. Anyway, there was a time when the Norcasians actually had to work for their place in the universe. 70 human years before the events of our history, the Norcasians were still a rising empire, but they defended their place in the universe with a passion and rigor not seen in older societies. An order of warriors was established by the Queen to protect the few colonies they had at the time. Later, they would adventure out into new frontiers and find territory. They were young adolescents from various allied planets, given the honor to serve the rising Norcasian Empire. They were responsible for maintaining physical strength and character. They're similar to nuns in that they can't hold relationships and are to devote their efforts to a higher power. At the time, the Royal Order was made up of Piligarans, Maristinians, young warriors from all places in the galaxy. In their current era of peace, however, only one of the original knights remains of the Royal Order, Clova 56. Meanwhile, the Queen's secret guard carries out her orders and leads the others of the new Royal Order to do her will. Clova has become a glorified secretary that is sent out to recruit others for Queen Nora's guard. While she is proud of her position, she is a little irritated that she isn't given more respect for her current duties. Along with a royal order, there is also a Masonic order, civilians who aided their nation through trade services. The most respected of all were the blacksmiths, who took the weapons of other species and repurposed them, made them easier to wield in combat, and even studied the properties of the metals used to make them. They were the most knowledgeable smiths of any empire, since the use and study of another race's weaponry was considered very taboo up until that point. The Masonic Order eventually fell into obscurity during peacetime, and its members became facilitators of market trade, but their knowledge remains the property of the Norcasian Empire. Editor's note, but I should also mention Clova. Originally, Clova was a sort of hive species where humans were grown in pods to be identical, and it was really weird, but as of the rewrites in an earlier video, Clova is an organization that conducts genetic experiments, taking the best pieces of each species to create a new superior life form after the universe falls to a prophesized Armageddon. That's all I have to say, back to the video. Last but not least, the Maristinians. The Maristinians, as I've said, are a fish people. They're very similar to the earthly old Roman Empire in that they have emperors, their weaponry and armor have a bit of Roman flair to them, and they're also imperialistic like the Norcasians. They're considered intellectuals, philosophical thinkers, but extremely brutal in combat. Their emperors are affectionately called queens, and the queen as of the time of this story is Queen Maris IX, or Queen Divinity. Divinity organized their territories, but is mostly known for her integration of religion into everyday life. I won't get too into it, but the basis of their religion revolves around the Celestials and an archangel order of old legends. Most Maristinians are exposed to the stories and religious practices of the archangels and accept them, but there are those that don't exactly abide by those principles. So, last three characters for the story, I guess. Lynn, of course, is a fish. He's a young, mild-mannered bartender, and he's at the mercy of his much more intense mother. He's in love with Chardonnay initially due to a history that they both have, and I imply that he has a love for travel that he sort of fulfills by learning about species that visit his family's bar. Clova 56 was just this mysterious character. Her original story involved her being one of many Clovas, all of them being Grove in a hive and possibly being related to humans. I don't know where I was going with that one. She was airy, unobservant, nice, and I really think I was going for a lipstick lesbian vibe with her, which I feel is too much of a stereotype now, and I definitely feel the need to fix her. Chardonnay Blaze, or Cherry Bomb, has the worst name and is just so underdeveloped. She's drunk, she's on the stockier side, she doesn't back down, she's rude, and at one point I actually considered making her a demon. In contrast to Clova, she was a butch lesbian stereotype that I'm especially frustrated by. For both of these women, my focus was definitely on displaying elements of femininity in both of them, and playing around with how I would want their relationship to work. Spoiler alert, Clova is now way more of a top. I really had fun with the stories for this one, so I hope you all enjoyed these last redraws. Again, thank you for those who have stuck around this long. These are fun for me to make, and it's nice to know that a few people have watched them, even if they're mostly for me. So let's finish off this series, shall we? Lynn is a Maristinian that grew up near the intergalactic market. His mother owns a bar on an asteroid very close to the market, so travelers from all walks of life have come and gone during Lynn's childhood. Lynn's been making drinks and taking orders for patrons ever since he was old enough to make a cocktail, and despite not being very well built, he certainly isn't against breaking up bar fights with men 3 times his size using his bow staff. Like most Maristinians, he carries himself eloquently, yet humbly. He is the opposite of his domineering mother in every way. He's tall, thin, kind, and empathetic towards their patrons. It's because of his looks and welcoming nature that their returning clientele are very consistent. He shares a strong childhood bond with Chardonnay. Cherry lost her home early in life, so she started coming to the bar almost daily since Lynn would give her free food under the nose of his mother. Occasionally, he would even let her stay the night with him. Needless to say, the two are close, and Lynn is extremely affectionate, even protective of her. Chardonnay really only sees Lynn as a sibling, so that obviously puts a damper on romantic prospects. It's Lynn that convinces Chardonnay to accept Clova's request from the Queen in the main story. Being trapped on an asteroid for most of his life and hearing all these stories about the adventures of others, he was eager to get the opportunity to join his lifelong friend on an adventure of their own. Of the members of the crew, he is the best mediator due to his tendency to get people to spill their guts. He can just enter any room, read the bad vibes, and get people to be honest with him. I imagine stuff like this would happen often. Hey, Adagius, whoa. Seems like you're having a bad time. Yeah. Would you like to talk about it? No. Oh, well, if you're sure. He doesn't love me! Unlike some male suitors and rejected nice guy characters, he's very secure and is okay with rejection since he's kind of had a lifetime to get over his feelings for Cherry. He tries flirting with Clova for about 5 seconds out of curiosity, but when she tells him she's a lesbian, he actually backs off and things don't get awkward. Well, except Lynn tries to get Cherry and Clova together so that he has something to do other than pine for both of them at the same time. Him and Clova actually become really fast friends due to their similar personalities, and she returns the favor by getting Lynn a rebound friend/love interest in Melira. He's just really good with people with his bartending experience, and he's a really good shoulder to cry on during the story. Because of his tendency to be the one looking after the more dominant personalities of the main cast, his own mysterious life and hobbies aren't explored, at least until his heresy is exposed. Queen Nora plans to make Clova, Lynn, and Chardonnay members of her secret guard. Lynn would take on the sin of heresy, and not just as a meaningless title. Lynn is a member of the Maristinian Empire, a notably religious society. So where does Lynn fit into that? It's obviously demon research. During his time at his family bar, Lynn has learned about many species, but the patron that initially piqued his interest was an old demon bookkeeper. He was the only demon young Lynn had ever met, and he found it disheartening when his belligerent mother berated the man and expelled him once she realized he was a demon. Lynn had spoken with the man and found him very likable, so he sought to show kindness to the man. The two broke bread together when they met again years later with food Lynn had stolen for him. As thanks for his kindness, the demon gifted Lynn with the last of his once glorious book collection, as well as his bow staff. Lynn took both and vowed to learn what he could about all species. He became obsessed with the occult, but more specifically with demon weaponry, their language, their wars and history, and because of his hidden knowledge and dedication to the demon race, he's labeled a heretic by Queen Nora's forces in the story. He realizes that his dedication has become an unhealthy obsession when he reacts to an event involving Melira, which we will get to, by cursing fluently in the language of the demons. At the end of the story, he leaves his childhood behind and keeps the demon bookkeeper's staff out of respect. However, he leaves the demon's book collection in the care of Adagios, who promises to give them to the greatest historians of all time, his grandparents' death and Mr. Bones. And if you haven't watched the redraw for Adagios and the Grim Reapers, that entire sentence probably sounds so weird. Lynn was bi-curious for a while since Cherry is the type that encourages people to explore their identities. He was open to experimentation and has had on and off relationships with men before. He ultimately realized that he was straight, though. So that makes Lynn the only straight, cisgender main character. From what I understand, the cliche about a group of straight people having the one gay best friend in the group isn't really the norm, so we're doing the opposite here. Lynn, of course, had a thing for Chardonnay, but he does end up with Melira in the end, after a long period of time and them actually developing feelings rather than it just being a rebound. Lynn's D&D class would be a monk. He's got a spiritual connection of the species, and he uses his bow staff similar to D&D monks. He can also make cocktails for all kinds of things. One might even consider them magic. He can make the typical Molotov cocktail, sure, but he can also make drinks that heal, drinks that help people sleep, and even drinks that warm and cool people. In short, he's a wild card disguised as a straight man, and he's one of my favorite characters for it. Clova 56 was one of the first 100 Clovas ever made. Like Rama 55, she was made to resemble an earthly legend, in this case Athena. Like Athena, she's strong, wise, graceful, and not straight. That's my Greek mythology headcanon, don't judge. Anyway, Clova is this beautiful, dominant warrior chick, and she's served the Norcasian Empire since she was made 80 years before the events of the story. She isn't exactly 80 though. You see, after serving in the Royal Order in 2020, she was only 10 years old, I might add, she was returned to the chamber that she was created in. It's kind of like this pod thing that keeps her from physically aging. All of the original Royal Order members died out over the next 60 or so years, and once that happened, Queen Nora re-released Clova as this way of restoring this sense of pride for Norcasian history in her subjects. Clova is basically a propaganda chess piece. Not understanding the truth, she took on her duties proudly, and as with her previous years of service, she was dedicated to the code of the Royal Order. No relationships, no questioning the Norcasian Queen's power, no abandoning the Norcasian people, just a lot of no's. Being young and made specifically to be a warrior, she was perfect for the job. But without the community she once had, she became lonely and sought out new connections. She developed feelings for Libby, a member of Queen Nora's secret guard, and the two got together in secret before eventually falling out due to Clova's fear of judgment. She would ignore and even berate Libby in public to save face, which is not the recipe for a good relationship. When Clova meets Chardonnay for the first time, she is repulsed by her inaction and addictions, but also intrigued by her spunkiness and fighting spirit. She, Lynn, and Cherry are joined by two passengers on their adventure, Adagios and Melira, but Clova kind of just sticks with Lynn and Cherry. She really just considers the other two as these civilians that are in need of rescue, and she doesn't exactly trust them. Cherry and Clova get along relatively well, mostly because Clova doesn't want to disturb the peace by telling Chardonnay how much she dislikes her. Over time, however, Clova and Chardonnay realize that they work really well together in combat, with Clova being the heavy hitter and Chardonnay being the bold one to encourage Clova to take risks. It's through accomplishing things together that Clova starts to fall in love with Cherry. Over the course of the story, Clova lets loose a little bit with Adagios and Melira, realizing that they have valuable gifts and places among the team. For the first time in 80 years, Clova has a family of warriors that has her back. But for the first time, she's able to be herself without orders dictating her actions. That is until truths are exposed to the rest of the team. The Clovas are both biological and mechanical in nature. They were created with certain beliefs, traits, and interests downloaded into their brains. However, that doesn't exactly mean they can't be tampered with. This is exactly what happened with Rama 55, and it also happened to Clova 56. When the queen from before Nora took over, she wanted to expand the Norcasian Empire, but she did so through hostile means, such as forceful takeovers. At the time, the Secret Guard didn't exist, and the Royal Order was in shambles. But Clova was readily available in her cryogenic chamber thing, so she was released and ordered to lead in the conquest of hundreds of planets, including Melira's. And these conquests were not without bloodshed, so Clova truly is violence. When she fulfilled her purpose, she was tampered with so that she would not remember what she had done. Limbo, the sloth mercenary that serves Queen Nora in the present day of the story, told Melira the truth about how Clova was responsible for her losing her parents, not Cherry. That's the instigating event that causes the entire team to collapse. The crew of 6 start to reveal their most hidden secrets, and once everyone is turned against each other, Clova shamefully returns to Queen Nora and accepts her place among the Secret Guard members, since she accepts that her attempts to be anything but a weapon to others are fleeting and selfish desires. Don't worry, the story continues with Cherry's redesign, so there is a happy ending. Clova is a cisgender lesbian. However, for the longest time, she didn't date anyone due to her commitment to the Royal Order. When she did, though, she realized very quickly that she wasn't into tame stuff. It may be because of her history with violence that she's somewhat of a sadist when it comes to short-term relationships. When she and Cherry start to fall in love with each other, she's always the first to instigate things despite not being very bold in battle. She's always the first to go for flirting or PDA. Her D&D class is a paladin naturally, and I will say that her class shaped where I went with her story the most out of all of these characters. Design-wise, you may have noticed a lot of Clova imagery. I designed Clova after the club suit in the deck of cards, since symbolically she's just another card in Queen Nora's deck. Cherry is, in color, design, and personality, sharp and hard to ignore. She's loud and occasionally obnoxious, but it's usually on purpose. She likes screwing with people, complaining, and speaking her mind about things, but when it counts, she's the one to remind people of the positives when things get hard. She's adventurous and very much like a grown woman with a childlike mind. This is partially due to the disappearance of her father as a child and the lack of guidance she had in adulthood. It's also due to that difficult upbringing of hiding and living day to day that she becomes a somber alcoholic and smoker most nights. Despite his disappearance, her father and his occupation live on in Cherry. He was a child of the Masonic Order of Norcasia, specifically a smith of a well-known family of craftsmen. He knew all there was to know about tinkering, whether that be demon weapons, Maristinian tech, or Piligaran warships. Cherry, by extension, has learned all there is to know about weaponry and ships. With what little money she had, she purchased the ship that would be used by their crew of 6 misfits in the story. She's a reckless but skilled pilot. While she's only crashed a normal amount of times, as she says, she's gotten into plenty of trouble for her driving. In fact, she's racked up so many violations that she is officially on the run for being a menace to society. Lynn helps her stay hidden, and she returns the favor by going on short trips and bringing him artifacts from her adventures. She's a seasoned traveler, even if she is a dangerous one. In the story, Cherry reluctantly agrees to assist Clova with her mission, and she dislikes Clova more than Clova dislikes Cherry. She thinks Clova is self-absorbed and a prude for her devotion to the Royal Order. When Clova proves herself in combat, though, Cherry becomes a total simp for her. Though she gives off an air of entitlement and confidence, Clova really softens Cherry and helps her find something to focus on, rather than filling the void of her broken heart with food and liquor. Even if not as a romantic partner, Cherry sees Clova as a new family until everything just goes to shit before the final act. Melira tries to kill Clova when one of the Queen's Secret Guard members tells her the truth about the invasion of the Norcasians on her planet. Cherry tries to talk her down but is attacked by Melira as well, and Lynn gets involved to protect Cherry. He attempts to use some kind of demon magic before realizing what he's doing is beyond a hobby and is basically going into the realm of Satanism. Limbo returns as they try to sort things out, bringing back the chaotic energy by revealing the truth about Cherry's upbringing. Cherry's father was a smith, but the reason he abandoned Cherry was because he lied about being a member of a well-known family, the Ambrosias. The family died out during the Intergalactic War, but one was deemed missing. As a poor young man down on his luck, his father saw this as an opportunity and impersonated the lost son of the Ambrosia family. He, of course, was found out, and he disappeared so that his father would not be disgraced with him. That's what makes Cherry a fraud, and Lynn knew the truth because of gossip at the bar. In that moment, she isn't able to handle the dishonesty from Lynn, the terrible things that Clova's done, and all of this other violence and betrayal and anger and rage, so she forces everybody to leave her ship. Everyone parts ways, Clova makes herself scarce and becomes a villain, Adagios and Zimue leave together, and Melira disappears onto another ship in search for her father. Cherry was heartbroken to learn the truth about Lynn, her father, and even the woman she loved. The journey, however, has changed her. She doesn't turn to booze or drugs or reckless driving to deal with her problems. Instead, she finds the crew and compels them to come back to Norcasia, if not for her, then to just reunite Melira with her father figure and to stop Clova from hurting more people. The crew is brought back together, they fight the entire Secret Guard, Cherry reaches out to save Clova from herself, and the Queen is defeated. So despite the sins that defined her and her closest family being their downfall, initially, it was each of them individually rising up against their sins that brought them back to each other. And obviously that is a very cheesy way to end things, but I can't help it sometimes. Cherry is cisgender and bisexual, and I'm no expert on the LGBTQ community or anything, but I do know that bisexuality is always pretty difficult for people to wrap their heads around, for a few different reasons. So to clear this up, Cherry is not a lesbian because she ends up with a woman in the end. She's still bisexual. She has dated men. She has dated women. The gay dial doesn't turn up if a dude marries a dude, people. Anyway, Her class is a barbarian. I looked it up and it was one of the weakest D&D classes outside of combat. Suits her pretty well, I'd say. Fun fact about her design, but unlike the other two characters here, Cherry's eye-bleeding colors have never and never will change, if I have anything to say about it. Though this whole terrible outfit gets a complete redo in this last part of the video. So, I really screwed up with Cherry's design. Like, I hated it so much that I did another redesign after giving myself a little more time to think about things and collect myself. But now for the actual title part of the video, the retrospective part. This story was kind of a product of a lot of things I liked back in 7th grade. Steven Universe, Undertale, FNAF to an extent, and definitely Guardians of the Galaxy. I still see it now in places. The gay space ladies of Steven Universe, the monster creatures of Undertale, the constant child suffering of FNAF, and the ragtag crew of Guardians. Heck, even the original character designs were made using old creator games like Doll Divine and whatever because I was obsessed with making new characters and recreating some of my old characters in a style that actually looked good. I can probably trace back pretty much every character, every story, every plot point back to something that influenced me in my childhood. So yeah, not necessarily creative, but looking back, I must really like making new things out of concepts and characters that I like. Innovation instead of invention, I guess. While I didn't exactly break new ground with the story, it's fun to see how subconscious influence morphed my stories over time. I'm pretty sure Neil Gaiman said something about building up a compost heap of ideas, and just letting them break down until you're left with the best of your ideas. I guess I've kind of been working on that since 4th grade then. Looking back, this story was me testing the waters sexuality-wise. I really just wanted to write about a pair of strong women making a relationship work because I wanted to see a relationship like that work. Maybe for my own sake, but at the time I didn't really know if I was Cherry, the spunky, jokey, addictive personality that ruins every relationship and good thing that they're given, or more like Clova, the ditzy, shy girl that just wants to be loved. Or maybe I was just Lynn, the boring guy that likes to think and listen to people and tell their stories because they can't see themselves going on their own adventures. Honestly, all of them are a mood, but it's interesting to see that I was just not in a great place, and I didn't know why at the time, but I guess I understood why better than I realized. It makes me realize how personal these stories are, even as I try to consider diversity of the cast. While I do reminisce on how naive and angsty I was when I wrote all these stories, and I do think that there was actual good stuff deep down betwixt the crevices of this story especially. I think it's more important to me now that everybody else gets the same chance that I did to just vent or project themselves onto a character. Kind of like Encanto did for a bunch of grown-ass adults that just wanted to watch a princess movie. It may be kind of vain for me to assume that my characters and stories could ever be that for anyone, but I hope that just talking about this kind of stuff, as vague as it is and terribly written and terribly talked about, helps others reflect like I have, and maybe the characters will help you get there too. But just in general, I want to hear other people's stories, so I tell stories to compel people to just open up about things. Because writing stories and drawing characters is just a more entertaining way for me to kind of discuss things that matter to me. So I was going to make a summary of the story, but this video is already pretty long. So I'm going to end it here with the finished designs for these characters. I'm actually really happy with how these turned out, and I can't wait to keep working on these designs to make them even better. And I hope you all enjoyed these mediocre character designs and mediocre story concepts, because I'm at least having fun, and I plan to make so many more! We've only gone through 2 stories after all. There are so many, I'm so sorry. The next story is going to be broken up into 5 separate parts, but no more than 4 characters per episode so that we can at least keep these videos short. As well as that, I'm going to keep doing the Pokey Cryptids again. I got up to Pidgey and got super lazy, but I will continue that, I promise you. I may do some more FNAF themed videos since you guys really seem to like those. I'm going to be reading the whole original Chardonnay and Clova story I wrote in 7th grade as well, and I've got another project in mind that I might start talking about in upcoming videos. I am super excited for this idea, but I really need to think this video through and do an actual sort of pre-production stage for this one. Rest assured, if I get this project off the ground, it is going to be such a wish fulfillment, and I think it might actually be decently good-ish. Anyway, that's it for today, and that's pretty much it for Pride Month. So with nothing else to say, this is V for Verbatim, signing off until the next video. Take care and show the love today. Bye!